The sun had just started to rise over the quiet village of Kisozi, casting golden light on the mud brick houses and the dusty paths that connected them. The roosters crowed, and women began their daily chores, sweeping the compound, fetching water, lighting fires. Among them was Aken, an 18-year-old girl with soft brown eyes and dreams far bigger than her small village could hold. Aken was known in Kisozi for her beauty, yes, but also for her sharp tongue and wild dreams. She wanted to study, to see Kampala, maybe even travel to Europe someday. But those dreams were about to crash hard against the reality her family had set for her. Her mother, Mama Lillian, had called her into the house that morning with a tone that told Aken something wasn't right. "Sit down," Mama Lillian said, her voice low and tired. She didn't meet Aken's eyes. "What is it, Ma?" Aken asked, brushing dirt off her skirt, her heart already pounding. "There's a man, a proposal." Aken laughed bitterly. "Another one? Let me guess, he's 30, got 3 children and just wants someone to wash his clothes." But Mama Lillian didn't laugh. She looked at her daughter and said, "This one we accepted." The room suddenly felt too small. "You what?" Aken stood up, her voice sharp. "You accepted a proposal without telling me?" Her father, Baba Okello, entered then. His face was serious, his steps slow. "You think we don't know you dream of university," he said. "But dreams don't feed us. We are drowning in debts, Aken. Your brother is sick. Your school fees are unpaid. The landlord has given us 2 weeks. This marriage is the only way." "To who?" she asked, tears forming now. "His name is Odera. He lives in the next village. Poor man, but respectful. No wife, no family. He farms alone. He came to us himself. Offered a few goats and chickens." Aken's mouth fell open. "You're marrying me off for goats and chickens?" Mama Lillian wiped a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "We had no choice, child." That night, Aken cried like she hadn't cried in years. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, bitter tears into her thin mattress. The next day she was taken to Odera's home. It was a small compound, a single round hut with a tin roof and a crooked fence. Odera stood at the doorway. He wore a faded shirt, pants too short for his long legs, and dusty sandals. His skin was dark and smooth, his eyes shy and quiet. He didn't look like a monster, but he didn't look like her dream either. They didn't speak much the first few days. Aken stayed quiet, her heart numb. She cooked, cleaned, swept, fetched water. Odera never shouted, never forced her into anything, never even touched her unless she allowed it. It made her more confused than angry. One evening, as the sun set behind the banana trees, Odera brought her a gift. It was a second-hand novel, Purple. Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She stared at it, shocked. "Where did you get this?" He smiled, his voice calm. "I noticed you like to read. I had this one from long ago." She took it, holding it like it was gold. "You read?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "I used to," he said. "Before I came back here." "Came back from where?" But he only smiled again and walked away. That was the first night she didn't cry herself to sleep. Days turned into weeks. Aken began to see small things. How Odera knew about world events. How he spoke quietly but with weight. How he always had money but never showed it. How his tools were too new, too expensive for a man who claimed to be poor. How a motorbike delivery guy would come once a week and hand him thick envelopes in silence. Something didn't add up. One morning, while washing his shirt, a note fell from the pocket. It was a receipt, bank transfer, Ugandan shillings. Over 600 million. Aken froze. Her heart pounded. Hands shaking, she hid the receipt back in his shirt, but her mind raced. Who was this man, and why was he pretending to be poor? Aken couldn't sleep that night. She lay beside Odera, listening to his steady breathing, the chirping crickets outside, the wind brushing softly through the cracks in the hut's walls. But inside her chest, it was chaos. That receipt, N600 million. It kept flashing in her mind like a warning light. She turned slowly, watching his face in the moonlight. He looked peaceful, harmless even, but who the hell was he really? Why would a man with that kind of money live like a broken farmer? Why would he wear torn shirts, sleep in a dusty hut, and eat boiled cassava every night? By morning, her head hurt from overthinking. She tried to act normal, cooked breakfast, fetched water, swept the compound, but her eyes never left him. She watched his every move now, looking for clues, and the more she looked, the more strange things she noticed. He never begged the local shopkeepers like the others did. They always welcomed him with a kind of nervous respect, like they feared offending him. The Boda guys greeted him with two hands and their heads slightly lowered. Even the local chief gave him unusual attention during village meetings. That day Akan followed him, quietly like a shadow. He walked toward the edge of the village, past the cassava fields and into the thick bush behind the hills. She stayed low, far enough not to be seen. After a while he reached a hidden metal gate camouflaged by shrubs. He unlocked it with a digital keypad. Her mouth fell open. Who in the village even owned a keypad gate? She waited, heart thumping, and after a few minutes he emerged again, this time wearing a clean buttoned-up shirt and proper shoes. He looked like a businessman now. In his hand was a briefcase. She ran home before he could see her. That night she confronted him. "What are you hiding from me?" she asked, standing in the middle of their small hut, holding the receipt she had pulled from his shirt again. Odera didn't speak at first. He sat down, took a long breath, and stared at her with tired eyes. He didn't look angry. Just like someone who'd been caught too soon. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said softly. "So it's true?" Her voice trembled. "You're not poor?" "No," he replied. "I'm not." She sank onto the bed, confused and furious. Why lie? Why pretend? You could have had anyone. You had money, status. Why marry a poor village girl like me? Why trick me? Odera stood up, walked slowly to the window and looked out into the night. "Because I was tired of being used," he said. "Tired of people pretending to love me just for my bank account. I was surrounded by vultures. Women who smiled only when they saw the cars, the clothes, the gifts. Friends who vanished when I stopped giving. I needed to disappear, to be nobody. I came back here to find peace." "And me?" Akan whispered. "What was I to you? A test? An experiment?" He turned, eyes full of something deeper. Regret, pain, maybe even love. "You were the first person who treated me like I mattered without knowing my worth. You cooked for me, even when you were angry. You never asked for more than what I gave. You cared for my home, for me, and I fell in love with you, Akan. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real." Her heart was a storm now. Everything she thought she knew was turning upside down. "And now?" she asked. "Now that I know the truth, what happens?" Odera walked to her, knelt down in front of her and said, "Now it's your choice. You can leave if you want. Or you can stay and we rebuild this together, with honesty this time. Not as rich man and poor girl, but as man and wife." She looked at him, this strange, complex man who had hidden his truth not to hurt her, but to protect something broken in himself. And suddenly, she didn't know what to feel. She needed time. She needed to think. Because love, money, truth, they never lived in simple lines. The next few days in the small hut felt like walking through fog. Akan moved through her chores like a ghost. Her hands were busy, but her mind was drowning. Every time she looked at Odera, it felt like staring at a stranger. Not because he'd hurt her physically or spoken cruelly, but because he had carried an entire double life without a single crack showing. She'd married a man she thought was broke and silent. In reality, she was living with someone wealthier than anyone she'd ever met. And the worst part, he had chosen to hide it, not just from her, but from the whole world. And still, she couldn't say she hated him. Confusion clung to her like a second skin. She found herself replaying every moment between them. The quiet way he made sure she had water ready when she returned from the stream. The way he had given her a book instead of jewelry. The nights he cooked when she had cramps and couldn't move. He had been kind, humble, patient. But was it love? Or just manipulation? One afternoon, while sweeping the compound, Mama Lillian came to visit. She brought a basket of groundnuts and sweet bananas, but Akan could tell she didn't come for greetings. The two sat under the mango tree behind the hut. Mama Lillian looked at her daughter, scanning her face like only a mother could. "You've changed," she said quietly. Aiken looked down. Have I? Yes. There's something heavy in your eyes. Tell me, has he mistreated you? Aiken shook her head slowly. No, not even once. Then what is it? A long silence followed before Aachen whispered, He lied, he's not poor, Ma. He's rich, very rich, like owning properties and briefcases full of money, rich. Her mother's mouth dropped. Hopen. Eh? Aachen nodded. He pretended to be poor, hid it from everyone. I found out by accident. Mama Lillian blinked slowly, trying to process. But then why would he live like this? Why marry a village girl? He said he wanted to be loved for himself, not his money, Aiken said. He said he was tired of being used. Mama Lillian didn't speak for a long time. Then she reached over and held Aiken's hand gently. My daughter, she said softly. Sometimes a man hides money because he is greedy, but sometimes he hides it because it has brought him pain. Maybe this one. He needed something real. Aiken looked at her mother, surprised. Are you saying I should forgive him? I'm saying... Mama Lillian exhaled deeply. Love isn't always clean. It's messy, confusing, painful. But if he respects you, if he doesn't treat you like property, if his heart is true, then you must ask yourself, can you still grow with him? Rich or poor? That night Aachen sat outside under the stars. Odera joined her, sitting a little distance away. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Finally she said, You know what hurts me most? He turned to her, listening. That you didn't think I could handle the truth, that you thought I'd become like the others. You said you wanted something real, but you didn't trust me enough to be real with me. Odera looked down, ashamed. You're right. I didn't give you a chance. I was scared. Of what? That you'd see me and run, that I'd lose the peace I found with you. She looked at him, this strange, gentle man who had lived 2 lives just to protect something fragile inside him. I'm not leaving, she said finally, but I need time. I need to understand who you really are. He nodded. Take all the time you need, I'll wait. From that day on, things began to shift between them, slowly, but surely. The silence between them turned from cold to warm. They started talking again, about books, about music, about his past. He told her how he'd made his fortune through small tech businesses, investments, and a lucky break that went global. He showed her some of the hidden documents, the accounts, even a photo of him shaking hands with a European investor. And Aachen? She told him about her dreams, her fears, her wish to study, to do more than cook and fetch water. You still can, Odera said one night, with me beside you. And just like that, something cracked open inside her, a kind of cautious hope. Not for a fairy tale, but for a future where maybe, just maybe, love could exist alongside the truth. Word had a way of spreading in Kisozi, like wind through dry grass, fast and uncontrollable. At first it started with whispers at the local borehole. Did you hear? They say that poor farmer Odera has money. No, not just money. Billionaire money. By the end of the week, the entire village was buzzing. People who once walked past Odera without a glance suddenly stopped to greet him with wide smiles and fake respect. Men who mocked his simple clothes now invited him to share drinks at the trading center. Women who once told Aachen she'd made a mistake marrying a poor man now greeted her with long hugs, fake laughter, and too many questions. But it wasn't all friendly. Jealousy began to boil just beneath the surface. One afternoon, Aachen passed by Naomi, the village tailor's wife, a woman known for gossiping with a mouth that never rested. Eh? So you finally hit the jackpot, Aachen, she said loud enough for others to hear. From cooking cassava to bathing in dollars, huh? Aachen gave a tight smile and kept walking, but her hands trembled. Inside, she felt exposed, like the entire village was undressing her with their eyes, searching for cracks in her story. That night she confronted Odera. Why didn't you tell them? She asked, pacing the hut. Why let everyone find out on their own? Odera sat quietly, elbows resting on his knees. Because once they know, they'll expect things from me. They'll come with hands open, hearts closed. That's what happened before. She sighed. But hiding it didn't protect us either. Now they're making up their own versions. He nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time they hear the truth. So he did. The following Sunday, during a community meeting under the old mango tree where announcements were made, Odera stood before the villagers. With Akan beside him, hand trembling in his, he told them everything. He spoke of his journey, how he grew up in the very same village, left as a young man to the city, struggled, failed, then made it. How he lost trust in people after friends betrayed him and women used him. How he returned to Kisozi not to show off but to find peace, to find something real. I didn't marry Akshan because she was poor, he said, looking around the crowd. I married her because she didn't care about my wallet. She respected my soul. There was silence, then murmurs, then clapping from some, not all, but not everyone was pleased. That same week a letter came. It was unsigned. Just a rough note shoved under their door. No one hides money without a reason. You're not fooling anyone. Watch your back. Akan's hands trembled as she read it. Fear crept into her bones. They didn't know who had written it. Maybe it was envy. Maybe someone who felt robbed of their own chance. But it shook the peace they'd started building. Odera, though, was calm. Too calm. He folded the note, tucked it into a drawer, and said, "Let them talk." But Akan couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was coming. Days later, while she was alone in the compound, 2 men came by, strangers, dressed neatly, too neat for the village. One smiled too much, the other didn't smile at all. "We're looking for Mr. Odera," the smiling one said. "Just a small business matter." Akan felt her stomach twist. "He's not home." The unsmiling one leaned closer. "Tell him, we'll be back. It's important." As they walked away, something inside her snapped into awareness. Odera wasn't just hiding from heartbreak. He was hiding from someone, and now they were coming. That night, Akan waited until Odera returned, pacing the compound like a woman haunted. As soon as he walked through the gate, she rushed to him, face tense, eyes wide. "They came," she said. "Who?" "2 men, dressed like city people. They said it was a business matter. They'll come back." Odera froze just for a second, then nodded slowly. But Akan didn't miss the flicker in his eyes. Fear, regret, recognition. "Who are they, Odera?" she asked, stepping closer. "And what are you hiding from me now?" He didn't answer immediately. He set down his bag, took off his sandals, and sat on the stool like a man carrying a mountain on his back. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "I never told you everything," he said. "Not because I wanted to lie. I was protecting you. Protecting us." "From what?" she pressed. "From my past," he said, voice low. "From the people who think I still owe them." Then the truth began to spill. Years ago, Odera had partnered with 2 other men, city men, ruthless and hungry. Together they started a tech distribution company that exploded across East Africa. Money flowed fast and so did greed. Odera, the quiet one, focused on structure and sustainability. But the other 2? They saw quick profit and got involved in shady deals, tax evasion, illegal software, under-the-table payments. When Odera discovered the truth, he tried to pull out. But the more he pulled away, the more threats followed. Not just legal ones, personal. Ones they said if I left they'd ruin me, accuse me of theft, drag my name through every court. "But you left anyway," Akan whispered. "I had to. I sold my shares quietly and disappeared. Went off-grid, changed my accounts, deleted. My tracks. I came here because it was the only place no one would think to look." Akan stared at him, stunned. "So those men today, they could be from that past," Odera said. "I don't know for sure, but it's starting again. The moment word of my money leaked, it started." A heavy silence wrapped around them, the kind that presses on your chest, makes you question every decision you've made. "You should have told me," she finally said. "I didn't want to drag you into a life full of fear. This village, us, it was my peace. You were my peace. But now it's not peaceful anymore," Akan said, voice trembling. "No," Odera replied, "it's not." That night they didn't sleep, and by morning the men returned. This time with smiles sharper than knives. "We found your man," the one in the black shirt said. "Or should I say Mr. Vincent Odera, Nairobi's missing golden boy." Akan stepped forward. "What do you want?" "We just want to talk," the man replied, flashing a fake smile. "Face to face, about a few loose ends." Odera stepped out, calm but cold. "We're done talking. You've had 5 years to reach me," the unsmiling one's voice dropped. "And now you're back in the open, hiding behind a village wife and chickens. Bold move." Aken's stomach flipped. "Get off my property," Odera said, his voice like steel. But as they turned to leave, the smiling one whispered, "This isn't over, not even close." That evening, a chicken was found strangled behind the hut. Just a warning. And with that, Aken knew this was no longer about love or betrayal. This was survival. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. "We need to leave," she said, but Odera just stared into the darkness, like a man facing ghosts that refused to stay buried. The decision was not simple, but it was necessary. By sunrise the next day, Aken had packed a small bag, just the essentials: 2 dresses, a scarf, her reading glasses, and the novel Odera gave her the first week of their marriage. She moved. Like a machine. No panic, no tears, just silent urgency. Odera stood by the doorway watching her. He hadn't slept. His face looked older, more worn, but his voice, when he finally spoke, was firm. "We can't just run," he said. "We're not running," Aken replied without turning to him. "We're choosing to live." They took the back path out of the village, avoiding the main road where eyes and mouths waited. They walked for hours, through bushland, past streams, over cracked earth. At one point, Aken's sandal tore, and Odera carried her barefoot until they reached the outskirts of Iganga, a dusty town halfway to Jinja. There Odera had a friend, not one of those city sharks. This one was real. Malik, a mechanic, lived with his wife and 3 kids in a small compound filled with grease-stained trousers, bouncing footballs, and the smell of roasted maize. Malik didn't ask too many questions. He just nodded, hugged Odera like a brother, and gave them one of his rooms. For the first time in weeks, Ashen slept without waking to shadows, but the peace didn't last long. 2 days later, Malik returned from his garage with worry stitched across his face. "They're asking around," he said. "Not here yet, but they will be. Men with accents, looking for a couple." "Offered money to anyone who talks." Aken's chest tightened. "So we leave again?" "No," Odera said this time, finally rising. "We fight back." That evening in Malik's sitting room, Odera pulled out his old laptop from a plastic bag he'd hidden deep in his sack. It was dusty but intact, and inside years of documents, financial trails, emails, and proof. Everything he'd collected over time about his former business partners, the fraud, the bribery, the threats. He hadn't looked at them in years, but now it was time. "I stayed silent," he said, clicking through folders, "because I wanted peace. But silence doesn't buy safety. It only delays danger." With Malik's help, Odera sent copies of the files to a trusted journalist in Nairobi, someone who had once tried to expose the corruption but lacked proof. This time they had more than enough. "We burn them with truth," Malik said. "And if they come before the story breaks?" Ashen asked. "We be ready," Odera replied. They didn't have weapons. They didn't have guards. But they had each other, and they had the truth. 2 nights later, just after midnight, they came. A black Prado, 4 men, 1 flashlight, 1 knock. Odera opened the door himself. Calm. "You didn't listen," the man in front said. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Odera didn't blink. "You're already too late. The files are out. Nairobi will wake up to your dirty secrets." "You think people care?" the man hissed. "You think justice works here?" "No," Odera replied, "but people talk. And when enough talk, even cowards like you get scared." Behind him, Aken stepped forward. She held her phone up, camera light on, recording everything. The man cursed and raised his hand, but paused. The light, the camera, the witnesses in the shadows. Someone had peeked from the compound next door. Too much risk. Too many eyes. They left. By morning, Nairobi was on fire, digitally at least. News stations began reporting the story. Screenshots of documents spread online. The names of Odera's ex-partners were everywhere. Malik's phone rang non-stop. "You've started something," he said to Odera. "They'll never be able to walk the streets again." But Aken knew. Victory didn't erase fear. It just replaced it with responsibility. Later, she sat with Odera on the rooftop of Malik's house watching the horizon. "Are we safe now?" she asked quietly. "No," he said, "but we're not hiding anymore. That's something." She leaned, her head on his shoulder. They were still standing, and that mattered more than anything else. The storm had passed, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. The men who once threatened them had vanished from the spotlight, their reputations torn apart by the weight of their own greed. The news cycle feasted on the scandal for a week straight. Ugandan tech scandal uncovered by rural billionaire in hiding. Odera's name was everywhere. Some praised him. Others called him a coward who ran instead of fighting earlier. But the truth? He didn't care anymore. He had his peace, his wife, and the clean air of Iganga mornings. That was enough. But for Aken, it wasn't that simple. Yes, the threats were gone. The fear had melted. But now came something even heavier, the reality. She was married to a man who owned land in 4 countries, businesses in Nairobi, and enough money to buy half the region. And yet she was still a village girl trying to make sense of it all. She sat at the edge of Malik's compound one morning, her feet dangling above the shallow ditch that separated the house from the road. Her mind was far, far away. When Odera joined her, she didn't move. "You've been quiet lately," he said gently. She nodded. "I have a lot in my head." He sat beside her, waited. "I keep thinking," she began slowly, "what if none of this had happened? What if you were just a poor farmer, and I stayed in that mud hut cooking cassava every day, barefoot, ignored, by the world?" Odera turned to her, eyes soft. "Would you have left me?" "No," she whispered, "but I would have stayed angry. Because I didn't choose you. I was forced into that marriage. And even now, it haunts me. Not your money, not your lies. But the fact that I didn't choose." Odera was silent. It wasn't the kind of silence that needed to be filled. It was the kind that said, "I hear you." "Then choose now," he finally said. She blinked, unsure what he meant. "I'm serious. Let's wipe it all, everything. No marriage, no debts, no expectations. If you want to leave, I'll help you. Start over, study, travel, whatever your heart wants." Her heart skipped. She hadn't expected that. He wasn't begging, he wasn't suggesting her. He meant it. "You'd let me go?" she asked. "I love you enough to want your freedom," he said, "even if it breaks me." That night she lay awake, thinking about the little girl she used to be, running barefoot in Kisozi, scribbling in torn notebooks, dreaming of something beyond dusty roads and arranged marriages. She thought of how life had thrown her into a stranger's arms, how betrayal turned into discovery, and how fear slowly shaped itself into respect. And the next morning, just before the sun peeked over the hills, she gave him her answer. She didn't speak it. She showed him. She reached into her small bag and pulled out a notebook, the one she'd started keeping ever since they fled the village. She handed it to him, flipped open to the last page. In careful handwriting, it read, "I choose you. Not because I have to, but because I want to." Odera didn't say a word. He just took her hand, pulled her into a quiet embrace, and held her, like something precious, like something finally real. In the weeks that followed, they moved out of Malik's house, not because they weren't grateful, but because they needed their own space. Odera bought a quiet home just outside of Jinja, far from the noise but close enough to opportunity. Jaken enrolled in an adult learning program, preparing to finally chase the education she thought she'd lost forever. Their love wasn't perfect. It still had awkward silences, clumsy apologies, and moments where ghosts from the past came knocking. But it was chosen now. And that changed everything. They built a life that didn't depend on secrets, where he shared his world and she shared her dreams, a partnership, a friendship, a home. And one rainy afternoon, while sitting by the window with a cup of tea in her hands, Aken smiled to herself. Because once she was a girl, forced to marry a man she didn't know. Now, she was a woman who had fallen in love with the truth he'd hidden, the pain he carried and the quiet way he fought for her. The rains came heavy that season, thick and endless, pounding the iron roofs like drums of memory. In their quiet home outside Ginger, Aken stood by the kitchen window, watching water snake through the garden paths. The smell of wet soil filled the air, rich and alive. She had grown to love that smell. It reminded her of where she came from and how far she had come. It had been nearly a year since she left Kisozi with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of anger. A year since she found out her poor farmer husband was hiding billions and pain. A year since she chose to stay, not out of duty but out of love, and life in its slow but generous way had begun to reward her. She had just completed her first short story for a regional writing contest. Her name, Aken Odera, would be printed on paper and read by strangers. She was studying full-time, finally chasing her passion for literature, while also helping Odera restructure his businesses legally and transparently. He trusted her with everything now, his accounts, his emails, his time, but it wasn't just about the money anymore. They'd grown something deeper. One Sunday morning, Odera took her to a quiet hill outside town. They sat under a massive acacia tree, sharing boiled maize and hot tea from a flask. The view stretched for miles. Green hills, dusty roads, tiny roofs dotting the earth like scattered stories. "I've been thinking," Odera said, pulling out a small velvet box. Aken looked at him, startled. "What's that?" He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple gold ring with the word "chosen" engraved in tiny, neat letters. "We were married by force," he said, "but I want us to marry again. This time, not as strangers, not as survivors, as partners." Tears welled in her eyes, hot and fast. He slipped the ring onto her finger gently. "No cows, no chickens, no pressure, just us, as we are." She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Later, back at home, as she placed the box in a drawer beside her books, a letter fell out from between the pages of her notebook. An old one, folded, faded, and almost forgotten. It was the letter she had started writing the night she almost ran from Odera, back when fear still whispered lies in her ears. She picked it up, opened it, and read, "To whoever I become. If you're reading this, it means you stayed. I hope you stayed for the right reasons. I hope love didn't come easy. I hope it was earned. And I hope, more than anything, that you are proud of the woman you've become." She smiled. Not the kind of smile that dances on lips, but the kind that sits deep in the chest where peace lives. Later that week, she wrote a new story. This one wasn't for a contest. It was just for her. It started like this. Once, in a forgotten village, a girl was sold into marriage like a sack of beans. But what they didn't know was that love can grow in broken places, and some poor men are just kings in disguise, waiting for someone brave enough to see them. The rains softened that evening. The world outside slowed, and in a quiet house, built on truth, forgiveness, and second chances, Aken and Odera curled up under one blanket, the past behind them, and everything ahead waiting to be written, together.